Hi, everyone. My name is Atara. I'm one of the co-founders of Natural Pregnancy and Birth. And today I have Angela with us. Angela and I will be discussing women's health, mother's health. And Angela, if you could just introduce yourself to our viewers and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. My name is Angela, and I study traditional Chinese medicine. And pregnancy and childbirth is a very big part of that because we can, take you from conception all the way to delivery. What got me into this? The laws of creation got me into traditional Chinese medicine, or the other way around, actually. It's been a passion of mine, health and wellness, because there has to be a better way of doing things than we already do them. And it's just always been a desire of mine to help people free themselves. And then, because I'm Canadian, so our rules are a little bit different here. And they say that in the US, it has the highest maternal mortality rate in Black women. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. And so that's what drew me to Atara when we met. We had that same vision. So this is why I'm here today, so we can shed some light on things that can be done the natural way.
Amazing. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing. I know a little bit about traditional Chinese medicine, but I don't think I know enough about it. Could you just go into that a little bit more? Maybe some of our viewers don't really know all that much about it.
Good question. Traditional Chinese medicine encompasses things like acupuncture. So we're using a very, very small needle. Strand of hair is how thick it is. Usually stainless steel. Sometimes it's coated with silicone for easier insertion, but doesn't have to be. So we use things like needles. Why do we use needles? Because in traditional Chinese medicine, the body it has what we call meridians, a pathway that a particular organ, its energy flows along that way. Now, here's the beauty of the law of creation. It tells you as above, so below. In traditional Chinese medicine, if you have a blockage above, you have a blockage below, right? And it goes the opposite way as well. If there's one below, you are guaranteed to find it above. So we use things like needles. We use things like glass cups where we put you use forceps with a cotton ball that's been dipped in a high percentage of alcohol. And when you light that cotton ball and you insert it into the cup, it removes all the oxygen and you put it on the skin. It is not hot, right? It sucks. It pulls the skin in. Now, depending on if the body is a little bit weaker, you put the cup on gently to strengthen the body. So we use needles, we use cups, we use herbs. These herbal recipes have been around for well over 5,000 years. Tried, tested, and true. And I know some people still use animal parts. You get the horn, the donkey, its hide. Oh yeah, it smells as bad as it sounds, but that's how you do it, right? Don't worry, it's all good. So what happens there is we use the cups, we use the needles, we use the herbs, but we also scrape, right? We scrape the body. We use, you can use a smooth piece of jade, and all of these tools that we use them to stimulate the meridian, the pathway that the energy flows in the body. And so with traditional Chinese medicine, it takes into account, if you go to the doctor and he says, oh, it's all in your head, right? They have a word for that. They call it psychosomatic.
Okay. Wow.
But the law tells you that everything is mental.
Mm-hmm.
So because we can't see it, like for instance, prolonged stress in the body, right? Prolonged stress in the body must show itself in the body. And the organs will respond in kind. So if you go and you say, doctor, I feel bloated. I feel gassy. Well, you have to think about, well, are you worried? Are you ruminating? What are you constantly thinking about? Because it gums up that flow of energy. And so the spleen and stomach, because they are at the center, this is why I want to experience is the bloating and the gas or the diarrhea or constipation. So we don't separate you. We don't say, oh, you have a headache, take this. No, you can have 40 people with a headache, and each one of them will have their own reason for that headache. And you tailor either the needle prescription, the cupping prescription, or the herbal prescription to match them. So when you come in and you say, well, we can't get pregnant. Like, why? And a lot of people don't understand that we grow babies in ovens, not refrigerators. What does that mean? It means, we love our belly shirts, right? Yes. The uterus is hollow. And because it is hollow, it will soak up because the space has to be filled. So the cold will fill it. So now you're trying to conceive and you can't because it's cold on the inside. So we have to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do here? What formula can I use? What needles can I use to warm the uterus? So that's how we function. Why is the uterus cold? There's a question you have to ask, right? So just little things like that. I know it seems like a lot, but that's how we function in that kind of medicine. It's very holistic. It takes the whole person from their thoughts right down to their pinky toe, right? Because it's the thoughts that influence what the body will manifest.
And I appreciate you bringing all of that up. And I think that one of the key things that you said was an individualized approach, because, I think in US healthcare, it's a one size fits all sort of deal. And you can't really approach everything that way. You can't approach things that way because, like you said, someone's reason for this may be completely different from mine or from yours. And so, so that gives me insight onto what traditional Chinese medicine is. I knew that it was like a holistic approach to health and wellness, but you really helped shed more light on that, and I appreciate that. And some of the things that you brought up actually sort of segues into another question that I have. How does fear affect labor?
Oh, what a beautiful question. Fear is associated with the kidneys and associated with water. Water is downward bearing. So this is why fear affects the kidneys and you pee your pants. So it's downward bearing. And because it is downward bearing, fear constricts. So it causes a clamping down or a closing of something, right? And so when you are afraid, right? And I think we're afraid because of what we perceive to be pain. But the reason why we're afraid is because we probably never done it before, right? But that fear causes the uterus to stop because it releases its own hormones. It releases fight or flight hormones, right? And fight or flight is not conducive to delivery. Fight or flight is conducive to survival. You have to be able to run away. And so when those hormones are released, you can't deliver a baby. If you've seen a cat who's in labor, if you do not give her space, you'll stop her labor and she won't have the babies. She won't. That's nature, because the chemicals are being released to inhibit delivery. Because if you're not in a safe space, how can you have the baby?
Right.
Because now the baby is also in harm, as are you. Right?
You're absolutely right.
That is how fear affects labor. The way to counter that fear is with knowledge. right? There are some things that are always beyond our control because that's the way life is. Sometimes things are beyond our control. But when I tell people when they're going through prenatal classes, labor it's not pain, you know. It feels like pain. Don't get me wrong. It's hella pain. But not the way we think it is. That pain is, so every contraction that happens shortens the cervix. It gets you from 10 to 0 effacement, if memory serves me correctly. So the uterus is being, the cervix is being shortened. And then it goes back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, until it can't go backwards anymore. And so that is the pain that is felt. Right? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it's purposeful. So like you said, that each contraction serves a purpose. It brings you closer to delivery. And so if we shifted our mindset on what labor is, what contractions are, that may help change the outlook of labor and delivery. And you brought up, I took some notes a bit earlier, and the hormone that you're talking about is epinephrine, or the adrenaline hormone, that stress related hormone. And like you said, you brought up the analogy with the cat, but it's this, you know, like you brought up, it's the same thing with us. Like if we're afraid, if we don't feel safe, our labor either slows or stalls. You know, and we're designed that way. It's that way until we get ourselves to a safe space. And Angela, I'm going to read you some statistics. 1 in 3 women report having been traumatized during birth. 55% report lack or loss of control. 50% fear for their baby's life or health, and 39% report that they didn't get enough communication from their provider. And you know, and it gives you a little bit more insight into the way that that women's healthcare is set up. Because, you know, the woman, she's the authority of her body, she's the authority of her baby. And so, you know, when things are happening to her that aren't being communicated, that has to be scary, that has to be traumatizing. So that kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier with you know, with fear and everything. And so how does birth trauma, how does that affect the postpartum experience?
Oh, it affects it not only mentally, but physically. Because if you see, those statistics are just staggering to me, first of all, you know, and a lot of the stories I hear, you know, oh, I had to have an emergency cesarean, that not being able to bend over to pick up your baby, to lift or carry or breastfeed your baby is traumatic, because skin to skin is required for the baby. Right? And so if you can't do that, now the mother's worried, oh no, is my child going to develop the way it should now mentally? Right? So then you're worried about that. And then not being able to breastfeed. And here's the thing. For a lot of the women who, if I know the midwife, I know the midwife for the baby, always the first place her finger goes is under the baby's tongue to check for a tongue tie, because it is critical that the child be able to latch and nurse. That's their nourishment. And so if the mother can't do that, well, then how does the child survive if you can't feed it? Right? I know someone now whose child is so severely allergic to soy, they didn't even know that. But because of her birth trauma, because the tongue tie event missed for weeks, and the child could not nurse. And because the child couldn't nurse, the mother feels inadequate. She feels like a failure, right? And so most of them don't even try again. And I know scientifically they tell you that if you've had that trauma where the child isn't nursing, if it's not been too long, I think it's like 3 months or something like that. That's how long. But if you allow the child to latch, your body will start to reproduce the milk again. But because women are not encouraged to do that, if you don't have a good lactation specialist, if you don't have a good midwife, right, then that information is not being communicated. So then the feelings of inadequacy, and because you feel inadequate, you're already now releasing a certain other type of hormone, right? Which now further inhibits breastfeeding and the care of your child.
Right.
Right. So it's not just mental, it is emotional, and it is also physical that happens to the mother. Because as I said, if she had a cesarean, you can't even climb the stairs. Right? Let alone hold the baby. So if you're a single parent and this is happening to you, well then, now the mind is like, oh my God, I'm alone, I'm scared.
Right.
So now that the trauma is perpetuated, not just from the mother, but to the child. So it's far reaching, right? It's far reaching because I think the birthing process is not respected. You see, it's not respected in the least. Yeah.
And the statistics unfortunately reflect that fact, that women aren't being respected, they aren't being honored. So I appreciate you bringing that up and answering that question. The other question that I had, and this sort of is related to the previous question, how to handle scary thoughts. Something I experienced a little bit of after I had my baby. And fortunately, my midwife, I felt comfortable enough to share some of what I was thinking and going through with them. But as we know, that scary thoughts can range from, where a woman is just fearful. She has this image in her head and that she keeps replaying that she's going to drop her baby, or in some extreme cases, it could look like, where a woman feels as though she may hurt her baby. In those cases, the more extreme ones. But what are some ways to handle scary thoughts?
Scary thoughts. Understanding the root of where they come from is the first part. You see, the heart houses the mind. That's where the mind lives, the heart. So if, as you know, with blood loss, right, from childbirth, that is the largest contributing factor to those thoughts, because the mind has to be anchored, but it's the blood that anchors the mind inside the heart. So feeding the mother adequately to build blood again is critical. That's the first place to start. Feed the mother, because when you feed the mother, she will create more blood, she'll create chi. So now she's not going to be exhausted. And now, because if you understand that blood loss is what contributed to the scary thoughts, that I think that's the biggest part that we're encouraged to understand. It is the blood loss that exacerbates it. And there is nothing in place that we do here in the West. So bone broths, high fat foods, meaning avocados, nuts, seeds, providing that you don't have allergies to those things, right? The key here is to start feeding the mother blood building foods. Beets are blood builders. If you're not vegan, then liver is a blood builder, right? Bone broth, the marrow out of the bone is a blood builder. You don't want to go with raw of anything just yet, like a salad. You don't want to do that because you don't want to put cold inside the body.
Right.
Right. So any kind of like a raspberry tea to help tonify and help the uterus to return to its former state. Making sure that there's no more physical trauma that will add to the blood loss. Those are things that we can actually do. But the very foundation is feeding the mother. And lots of us have traditional things that we do. Right. I know like a good ham hock soup, split peas. I speak that way because this is how I live my life. I'm not a vegan. I do understand because everybody awakens in their own time.
Absolutely.
I do mostly vegan things, but homemade vegan as opposed to store-bought vegan. There's a difference. So you want as much calories in the mother because that is how much milk she will make and the quality of the milk for the baby. So that's the physical side of things. So now when you get the thoughts, it's more like along the lines of, okay, you know what? I just went through this experience and these feelings are natural. I'm in a safe enough space that I can reach out to someone who I trust to say, you know what? That thought crossed my mind. Oh, that thought really did cross my mind, but I have to remind myself that everything is okay. Everything's okay. And if the thoughts persist, so long as you have, this is why midwives are, to me, better, because they don't judge because they understand the situation. So they don't come in guns blazing, oh, I'm going to take your baby because you're unsafe. They don't do that. They assess the mother now, and they find ways of fortifying the mother, strengthening her emotionally is what they do. And that's the psychological work that needs to happen. And so when I tell people about the laws, if you're having a repetitive thought over and over and over again, you're going to have to experience it. So the power lies within you to say, you know what? Yeah, I know that that's just the thought. I'm okay. I'm okay. And having the ability to speak to someone that you trust, right?
Absolutely.
Those are the steps that you take. And should the situation escalate, then a supplement, a blood building supplement, because you've got to look at that deficiency. Blood deficiency creates a whole host of things that we think are psychological, but it's just actually blood related. But we don't examine that here in the West. Right? You don't punish the mother for the thoughts. Feed her and the thoughts will go. Well, that's so lighthearted, Angela. How can you be sure? What if she's just crazy? We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We can't say the mother is crazy. We can't say that. You can't even think it. Right? Because now if you're looking at her as her caregiver and you're thinking she's crazy, she knows this is exactly what you're thinking about her. And it doesn't make her feel comfortable or safe. Right. So it has to do a lot with, those are the three things. Feed the mother. If things escalate, now we look at the thoughts and we go from there. But also the way the mother is viewed by the caregiver plays a role, a huge role in how she behaves.
Absolutely. And I'm so
those are
glad you said
three
that.
things.
I appreciate that because it's important to talk about, to raise these issues, but to also provide solutions for them. And
Exactly.
I really appreciate that. And something that you said about blood, just circling back to birth trauma, blood loss and delivery is normal. But, when we start experiencing, birth trauma that results in excessive blood loss, so I can definitely see how that fuels, the helps fuel the postpartum experience, and what thoughts are going to manifest after delivery and things. And so I'm really glad that you spoke to that. And we actually talked a little bit about this already, but my other question was going to be, what is the connection between the foods that we eat and our emotional and mental health? I've been looking into the gut-brain connection, and 80% of our immune system is located in our gut. And so, you know, and if we don't feel well, then we're not going to be able to operate well. You know, our thoughts dictate the way that we operate in things. And so, yeah, so what would you say what's the connection between the foods we eat and our emotional mental health? And you did speak to that a little bit, but.
It's, you see, because a lot of the food we eat now has empty calories, you know, and you can't fool the body. If you're not giving the body nutrients, it cannot create what it must. So it's going to show up, right? And so where do we find these foods? We got to make time now for fresh market. Wherever we can find. So if that means you go to a Trader Joe's, but peruse the fresh aisle. Anything you can make soup with. Like for us, like I said, we don't eat a lot of meat, right? But when I do go to the organic store, I get a chicken carcass because, you know, they cut everything off of it, right? But it still has a lot of meat on it. But I get that because the bones, right? The bones, the marrow. And so when I make a soup with those bones, now I can add my sweet potato, my red potato, my beets. I can add any kind of a root I want in there. I like ginger.
Me too.
Ginger is one of the most balanced herbs we can get our hands on. It's not hot and it's not cold. It is warming. And when you do that, you help ease digestion so that the foods now that you are taking in that are nutrient dense, they'll be assimilated, right? Because a lot of the issue is not that just that you're eating and eating willy-nilly, it's that what are you absorbing, right? And ginger helps with that. And I usually use, because when I do my herbs every day, right? And so I always put fresh ginger in there. And it's just a good feeling in your body, like you can physically feel it. So any kind of a bone broth, root vegetable, anything fresh, raw, depending on where you live. It's minus 40 degrees Celsius with us today. So there will be no salads. Because you can't put cold inside the body and then have cold on the outside, because this is not going to make you feel good. It will hurt you. It literally will cause cramping. So hot foods, broth, soups, lentils, peas, beans, those kinds of things. But soups and broths are the easiest to digest and get the most nutrient absorbance out of them. So that's where you'd want to look, as opposed to canned or prepared. And even if you must do canned, because everybody's financial situation is different.
Right.
Canned beans, peas, lentils, along that line. Not canned meats, not canned fruits. You see it?
Right.
So those things, try and stay as fresh as possible. And liquids, water consumption, a good quality spring water is really important for milk production and just being able to lubricate joints and all these things. This is where we want to be when we go into the grocery store. And so now you've got to prioritize the health now, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not that you go and you say, oh, I must do this right now. There's no must, because must causes us to blame ourselves or shame ourselves. Oh, I
Mhm.
failed. You say, well, you know what? Okay, I can get apples today, then I'll get apples. I can get pears next, I'll get pears. The point is, these things are cumulative within the body.
Right.
So that's what we do. That's how we add to it. Pardon me, don't worry about me. I'm just popping up my water bottle. But
Um,
that's what we do.
yeah, no, you brought up an excellent point. Everyone's financial situation is different. Everyone is at a different place when it comes to diet. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we live in a very fast-paced society. So it's really hard. I remember when I was transitioning, to mostly plant-based, it was just really difficult for me to slow down. Like, McDonald's is right there, Burger King is right there,
Yeah.
and just grab something on the go. But, it really, so when we take the approach that you just outlined, it really forces us, not just that, but even motherhood in itself forces us to slow down and sort of evaluate, okay, I could do this better. And not in a way that shames, but just like you said, slowly making these choices that over time,
Hmm.
you begin to see a really, really, really big change. My final question is, what are some healthy ways to de-stress?
Ah, anything that you do that brings relaxation to your body.
Mhm.
We do things naturally. Some of us draw, some of us paint, some of us sing, some of us dance, some of us go for nature walks.
Mhm.
So, whatever is natural to you, because it automatically will make you feel much more at ease, then that is what you do.
Right.
Me, I am a creature of solitude. I like my quiet. So I sit in the quiet and I self-reflect. All right.
Mhm.
My son, how he does it. I don't know how he does it. He likes to move, and he's movement based.
Mm.
He's kinetic. I am not that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So for me, I get overwhelmed when I'm with him for a long time. I'm like, oh, that's too much for mommy, because I like that stillness. But it is whatever you do that brings you the greatest amount of peace.
Mhm.
And that's different for everyone. And the encouragement is, reflect on yourself. I used this analogy this morning. It's like looking in the mirror and checking your teeth for kale. That is what self-reflection is. That's what meditation is. Looking at yourself. What do I like?
Mhm.
That Because only you will know what you like.
Right.
And so I try and guide people always back to that inner self, that intuition, that spirit that speaks to them, that still small voice that says, hey, you like writing. Why don't you journal?
Mhm.
Right? So whatever it is that brings you the most peace is the activity that you should partake of. Or I don't like using the word should. Whatever it is that you like to do it.
Right.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And that's something about the postpartum experience is sometimes moms have a hard time prioritizing themselves, and just getting back to the things that they enjoy. They get
Yeah.
so wrapped up in this new, beautiful, tiny human, which is natural, but at the same time, we still have to make time for the things that that we enjoy, that we get peace from. And
Yes.
so I appreciate you bringing that up. And thank you so much, Angela.
Oh, no worries. With society, we focus so much on the baby,
Mm-hmm.
but the baby does not thrive if the mother is not thriving.
Right.
So who needs the greater focus?
Right.
The mother does.
Mm-hmm.
right? The mother's the one who usually has to sacrifice something. Oh, I got to give up this. I got to give up this. I got to give up that. I encourage you today. It's not a giving up on things. I don't like that word sacrifice. Sacrifice is pain. It is loss. You've gained a new life in your world. And so for you as a mother, it is critical for you to self-reflect and self-care, because if you don't do that, then the child suffers. So you can't focus on the child, right? Because if you focus on the child, it still suffers, even though you're focused on it, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. That seems cliche to say, but the mother must always be filled up. And this is why a community of mothers, because when you recognize, oh, wow, she's getting tired, I'll take the baby. It's a community. And if we could get back to that, this is how now, right? So that fear of, oh no, is this mother going to judge me if I'm not parenting like her? We got to get rid of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not about that. It's about, here's a mother in front of you who may be struggling, and all she simply needs is someone to say, I got you, sis, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
This is what is required, that compassion, because you too were once, or I too was once in the position of, oh my God, I could really use some help right now. Yeah. Community is everything, right? And learning how to appreciate each strength that each mother brings to the community. This is why the community is important, because a child can look into the community and see different versions of itself that it wants to mirror itself afterwards, right? Between mother and father. But what society has done, it's taken it down to one mother, one father, one child in the house. So now you can only be like your mother because that's the only example of a woman you see. Whereas if you've got your aunties, your grandmothers, your sisters, your cousins, you see a plethora of what womanhood should be like in all of its facets. So you can pick from each one and build yourself. So that's just my encouragement today. Start a community.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Angela, you do, not only do you teach on traditional or practice traditional Chinese medicine, but you offer meditation services as well. So,
yes.
So if viewers wish to find you, we'll go ahead and make sure that we link that information as well. But I just want to thank you for your time, for your wisdom and insight, and just for you being here, and also thank our viewers as well. So
it was an absolute pleasure.